We return to the ugly world of war and conflict. Iraqi forces have begun today an assault on Fallujah. It's a city that's been held by the Islamic State longer than any other in Iraq or Syria. And this is a big move in their attempt to try to, quote, tear down the black flags of the strangers who have kidnapped this city. What does this mean for the war on terror? And how is this going to move forward and show any of this movement that we have been seeing on this assault and how the world is trying to take the areas back from ISIS? Joining us is Bill Roggio, who is a senior fellow, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and managing editor of the Long War Journal. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Hey, I'm
Thanks
great. Best from Matthew Fisher, our previous guest. Matthew Fisher said he knows you well. He's joining us from Japan on the G7 summit, so I want to pass that along.
Yeah, Matt and I spent a little time in Kandahar in I think in 2006. It's been a while.
All right. He gives you his best. What does this mean as Iraqi forces and they're launching this operation? Do they have a chance here, Bill?
Yeah, I think they certainly have a chance to secure the city. They've had success in other areas. The problem that I have with this, I'll jump right into that, is that the fight is going to be a significant part of the fight is going to be led by these Shia militias that are loyal to Iran. You have Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Quds Force, which is basically it's a special operations branch, foreign branch, or special operations branch, directing operations in Fallujah. He met with all the militia leaders. This feeds in the Islamic State narrative that Iraq is being the Iraqi government is a tool of the Iranians. But the Islamic State has had some major setbacks in the past year. They lost Ramadi, which is the provincial capital of Anbar, then a town called Eat, which is just a little bit west, and recently a town called Rutba. That's all in Anbar, and then they lost cities like Beji and Tikrit. So they're being beaten back. Look, militarily, I don't think the Islamic State is going to have a tough time. I figured from the beginning it would have a hard time holding ground for an extended period of time. But defeating it militarily doesn't mean you're defeating the group. We learned that when we withdrew from Iraq in 2011. We thought al-Qaeda in Iraq was all but defeated and no longer capable. And then within a year, its successor became the Islamic State. But didn't officially become the Islamic State till 2014. But it was taking over ground in Iraq and Syria. So these are capable groups. They're committed to the fight. They're committed to the fight in the long term. And the Iraqi security forces are going to have a difficult time securing these population centers over long periods.
And as you're explaining this, I'm thinking about how far we've come, especially with this war on terror. And a reminder, as we read this story today, that the Iraqi forces were going to begin this assault on Fallujah, we were reminded of the old war. That's what we used to, as you just brought us back to Iraq and the Iraq war and Afghanistan. That's the way we used to measure things. ISIS has changed the deal. As you say, they may move in and take over some physical ground, but there is a whole other thing going on here. Have we got to that, Bill, now, that there are two different wars happening with the advent of ISIS?
No, I think the Islamic State is it's operating just as al-Qaeda operated. Mm-hmm. Al-Qaeda in Iraq and al-Qaeda elsewhere has controlled territory. Al-Qaeda in Yemen controlled most of southern Yemen up until a couple of weeks ago for over a year. They also did it between 2011 and 12. And Somalia, Shabab, al-Qaeda's affiliate, has held ground. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was in control of large areas of Iraq. That's why we had to launch the surge back in 2007. So a lot of people think the Islamic State just came out of nowhere, but they were al-Qaeda. They were al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they held ground from 2005, 6 up until the surge until 2008, 9. So, and it took a large number of U.S. troops. And the problem is we're not committed to the fight in the long term. Look, I think this narrative of the Islamic State really is politically driven, and I don't like to delve into politics, but but this is why it happened. When the Obama administration killed Osama bin Laden and withdrew from Iraq, his answer was, we've defeated al-Qaeda.
It's over.
Al-Qaeda is no longer relevant, right? And then, lo and behold, jihadist groups start taking, and the Arab Spring was the death knell of al-Qaeda. And except it wasn't. And all these groups continued to operate and continued to function. And then, lo and behold, there's a dispute between the al-Qaeda and Iraq's leadership and al-Qaeda Central. They create the Islamic State, and then we could just put all this on. Everyone has a short memory anyway, so we could just put all this on the Islamic State and say they're a new and revolutionary group. But this is just merely more of the same.
More of the same. And as we look at this president, he has been criticized for backing out of any commitment to really getting in and fighting terrorism. Is this, as you say, a bit of a smoke and mirrors here? And as he prepares his legacy, did it really work?
No, it didn't work. I mean, look at when President Bush left office, you had the Taliban in Pakistan and Afghanistan. That was a problem. You had Shabab and actually, it wasn't even Shabab at that point, or maybe it was just emerging as Shabab. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula wasn't even formed, and Al-Qaeda was defeated in Iraq. Now, believe me, I could sit here and criticize the Bush administration for what they did and dropping the ball, but it was a somewhat manageable situation. Today, you have the Taliban taking over large areas of Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban still operating in Pakistan. We just killed the Taliban's emir in a drone strike inside Pakistan. Shocking. You have Al-Qaeda controlling areas in southern Yemen and in Somalia and in Mali, and Boko Haram, which has now pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. It previously was tied to Al-Qaeda. They control territory in Nigeria. I mean, you have all of this. I could go on and on and on. Libya, you have jihadists, both Islamic State as well as Al-Qaeda's branch in Libya controlling territory. You look at the picture today, it's far worse. So he can't, yes, he killed bin Laden. Yeah, he killed the head of the Pakistani Taliban. President Obama has had a headhunter strategy. He believes that we could decapitate these terrorist groups and they'll fall apart. And killing senior leaders makes for good news reports and good optics, but it doesn't fundamentally change because these aren't, small terrorist groups. These are organizations. I always say to people, how many U.S. generals or how many U.S. politicians, like presidents, are still in office from the 9/11 attacks? President Bush is gone, General Franks, and every general who served is pretty much is no longer serving. Well, these jihadists, they have their bench of generals, but they don't retire, they die. That's what they die. They say they're going to fight until the end, and that's what they wind up doing. Occasionally, they die of old age. But they're jihadists for life. They're committed to their cause. I can't stand them. I hate them more than anyone. But you have to respect and admire their commitment to the fight.
Yeah, unlike some of the other that you have just mentioned, and we will see. I mean, this is all kind of a contagious thing, and I know there is criticism even here in Canada from some that maybe we are adopting kind of like the President Obama commitment to the war on terror, kind of in on paper, but not in the heart. Bill Roggio, it is always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Hashtag.
Thank you so much, Arlene. Always a pleasure.